Imagine this. You are alone in enemy territory, hunted, starving, freezing, with no hope of rescue. Behind you, the wreckage of your aircraft smolders in a foreign field. Ahead, German patrols scour the forests for American pilots like you. Surrender means torture, interrogation, perhaps execution. Escape means stealing an enemy fighter plane you have never flown, with instruments labeled in a language you cannot read, and flying it across hundreds of miles of hostile airspace where both sides will try to kill you. This is not fiction. This is the story of First Lieutenant Bruce Carr, and what he did on a cold November morning in 1944 defies everything we understand about survival, courage, and the will to live. If you are hearing this story for the first time, you will not believe it is real. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel, and down in the comments, tell us what city, state, or country you are watching from. Stay with us until the very end, because what happens in the final moments of this story will leave you speechless. The sky over Czechoslovakia on the 2nd of November 1944 is the color of steel and ash. First Lieutenant Bruce Carr, 20 years old, sits in the cramped cockpit of his P-51 Mustang, 6 miles above the earth, where the air is thin and cold enough to kill. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine hums with a mechanical violence that vibrates through his bones. Around him, the formation is tight. 11 other Mustangs, silver predators cutting through hostile sky, hunting for German fighters that have learned to hide, to scatter, to survive. This is the 385th sortie of his tour. He has flown so many missions that the terror has calcified into routine, but routine does not mean safety. It never has. Below the landscape is a patchwork of forests, villages, and rail lines that feed the German war machine. Somewhere down there, factories churn out ammunition. Somewhere down there, soldiers move west to reinforce crumbling lines. Somewhere down there, the war continues its slow, brutal consumption of men and metal. Carr scans the horizon, eyes flicking between the gun sight and the rearview mirror welded to the canopy frame. In this sky, death arrives without warning. A glint of sunlight on a canopy. A shadow crossing yours. A burst of 20mm cannon fire that punches through aluminum and flesh before you even know you are being hunted. But today, the enemy is not in the sky. The first explosion is not loud. It is a flat, metallic crack like a hammer striking an anvil, and then the Mustang shudders as if struck by an invisible fist. Carr's body jerks against the harness straps. The control stick twitches in his hand. For a fraction of a second, he does not understand what has happened, and then he sees it. Smoke. Black smoke pouring from the engine cowling, thick and oily, spreading across the windscreen like a stain. The instrument panel flickers. Oil pressure dropping, coolant temperature spiking. The Merlin engine, 1,200 horsepower of British engineering, is dying. Anti-aircraft fire, flak, 88mm shells detonating in airbursts, filling the sky with shrapnel that shreds metal and severs fuel lines and kills pilots in their seats. He never saw the gun battery, never had a chance to evade. The shell found him anyway, and now the Mustang is no longer an aircraft. It is a falling object. Carr's hands move without thought, trained by hundreds of hours in the cockpit. Throttle back. Mixture rich, trim for best glide. But the engine is not responding. It is seizing, the cylinders grinding against metal fragments, and now there is fire. Orange flames licking out from the seams of the engine cowling, fed by high-octane aviation fuel that burns hot enough to melt aluminum. He has seconds, perhaps less, before the fire reaches the fuel tanks and the Mustang becomes a fireball. The decision is not a decision. It is a reflex. He pulls the canopy release. The plexiglass frame slides back, and the wind hits him like a physical blow, a roaring chaos of freezing air at 300 miles per hour. He disconnects the oxygen hose, the radio cord, the harness straps. He rolls the aircraft inverted and gravity does the rest. He falls. The world becomes a spinning blur of sky and earth, blue and brown, alternating in a nauseating rhythm. The wind tears at his flight suit, his goggles, his gloves. He counts. 1, 2, 3. At terminal velocity, a human body falls at 120 miles per hour. Too fast. He pulls the ripcord. The parachute deploys with a violent jerk that feels like being caught by a giant hand. The harness straps bite into his shoulders and thighs, and suddenly the chaos stops. He is floating now, suspended beneath a white canopy, drifting down toward enemy territory. Above him, the Mustang continues its death spiral, trailing smoke and flame, until it impacts a hillside and explodes in a fireball that sends a column of black smoke into the sky. A beacon. A signal. Everyone within 10 miles now knows an American pilot is coming down. Carr looks down. The ground is rising to meet him. Forests, fields, a road cutting through farmland, no towns visible, no troops visible, but that does not mean they are not there. He reaches down and pulls his service pistol from its holster. A Colt M1911, 7 rounds of .45 caliber ammunition. Useless against a platoon of German infantry, but it is all he has. He hits the ground hard, legs buckling, rolling through dead leaves and mud. Pain shoots through his ankle. He gasps, forces himself upright, and immediately begins gathering the parachute. White silk against dark earth. Visible from the air. Visible from the ground. He bundles it into his arms, stumbles toward a cluster of trees, and shoves it beneath a fallen log. He collapses against the trunk, chest heaving, and listens. Silence, no voices, no engines, no dogs, not yet. He is alone. Alone in Czechoslovakia, a country occupied by Nazi Germany, where the Gestapo tortures resistance fighters in basement cells and hangs collaborators from street lamps as warnings. Alone, with no map, no compass, no food, no water. Alone, wearing a leather flight jacket with United States Army Air Forces insignia stitched on the shoulder. Alone, with a pistol and 7 bullets. He knows the protocol. Evade and escape. Move west. Avoid roads and towns. Find Allied lines. But the front is hundreds of miles away, across German-held territory, crawling with Wehrmacht patrols, SS units, and Gestapo informants. The odds of making it on foot are nearly zero. The odds of being captured are absolute. He begins to walk. The first day is a blur of adrenaline and fear. He moves through forest, staying beneath the canopy where aircraft cannot spot him. The terrain is rough, steep hillsides covered in underbrush that tears at his flight suit. His ankle throbs with every step, swelling inside his boot until walking becomes a controlled limp. He has no food. He has no water. He finds a stream and drinks, cupping his hands and gulping down water that tastes of earth and rot. It might be contaminated. It might give him dysentery. He drinks anyway. As the sun sets, the temperature drops. November in Central Europe is brutal. The cold seeps through his flight suit, through his skin, into his bones. He has no shelter. He finds a thicket of dense bushes and crawls inside, curling into a ball, wrapping his arms around his chest. He does not sleep. He lies there, shivering, listening to the sounds of the forest. Branches creaking in the wind. Animals moving through the underbrush. Distant voices, perhaps real, perhaps imagined. The second day is worse. Hunger sets in, not the casual hunger of missing a meal, but the deep, gnawing emptiness that makes thinking difficult. His body is burning through its reserves, metabolizing muscle and fat to stay warm, to keep moving. He finds nothing to eat. No berries, no roots, nothing. He keeps walking west, or what he thinks is west, navigating by the sun when it breaks through the clouds. He sees his first German patrol on the third day. He is crossing a dirt road when he hears the engines, trucks. He dives into the ditch, pressing his body into the mud, and watches as a convoy rolls past. Opel Blitz trucks, canvas-covered, filled with soldiers. 30 men, maybe more. They are singing, their voices rough and discordant, a marching song he does not recognize. He holds his breath until they are gone, then crawls out of the ditch and runs. That night he reaches a village, small, perhaps 20 buildings clustered around a church with a stone steeple. Smoke rises from chimneys. Lamplight flickers in windows. He crouches at the edge of the tree line, watching, trying to determine if it is safe, if there are sympathizers who might hide him, feed him, help him. But he does not speak Czech. He does not know who to trust. He has heard stories of pilots who knocked on doors and were turned over to the Gestapo within hours. He moves on. By the 4th day, he is hallucinating. Exhaustion and starvation have eroded his mind. He sees shapes in the shadows. He hears voices that are not there. He stumbles through the forest, no longer sure if he is moving west or in circles. His ankle is ruined. Every step is agony. His lips are cracked and bleeding. His hands shake uncontrollably. And then he realizes something that changes everything. He is going to die out here. Not from a bullet, not from an interrogation. He is going to die from exposure, from starvation, from exhaustion. He is going to collapse in some nameless forest and freeze to death, and no one will ever find his body. His family will receive a telegram, missing in action, presumed dead. They will never know what happened. They will never know he tried. But there is another option. Surrender. Not to the Wehrmacht, not to the SS, not to the Gestapo, to the Luftwaffe. The German Air Force has a code. Pilots are officers. Officers are treated with a degree of respect, even in captivity. Luftwaffe interrogators do not use the same methods as the Gestapo. Luftwaffe prison camps are not extermination camps. If he can find a Luftwaffe airfield, if he can surrender directly to German pilots, he might survive the war. It is not freedom. It is not escape, but it is survival. The idea takes root. He changes direction, no longer moving west but searching for an airfield. He listens for the sound of aircraft engines. He watches the sky for landing patterns, and on the 5th day he finds it. The airfield is small, a grass strip carved out of farmland, surrounded by trees for camouflage. He approaches from the northeast, crawling on his belly through a field of dead wheat, and watches from a distance. There are buildings, hangars, fuel trucks, and aircraft. Focke-Wulf 190s. He recognizes them immediately. Radial engines, low wings, the distinctive silhouette of the Voyager, the butcher bird, one of the most lethal fighters in the Luftwaffe inventory. There are 6 of them parked in a neat line, painted in mottled gray and green camouflage, each one bearing the black cross of the German Air Force. He watches for hours, learning the rhythm of the base, mechanics working on engines, pilots walking between buildings, guards patrolling the perimeter, and then he sees something that stops his heart. One of the Focke-Wulfs is fueled and armed. He can see the ground crew loading ammunition belts into the wings. He can see them topping off the fuel tanks. He can see them performing the pre-flight checks, running through the checklist, preparing the aircraft for a mission at dawn. And in that moment, Bruce Carr makes a decision that will define the rest of his life. He is not going to surrender. He is going to steal it. The idea is insane. He has never flown a Focke-Wulf 190. He has never flown any German aircraft. He does not speak German. He cannot read the instrument labels. He does not know the startup procedure. He does not know the flight characteristics. He does not know if the aircraft is booby-trapped, if there are guards inside the cockpit, if the ignition requires a key or a switch or a sequence he cannot possibly guess. But he is out of options. He waits until nightfall. The base goes quiet. Lights dim. Guards retreat to warming huts. The cold is his ally now. The colder it gets, the fewer men stay outside. He watches the sentry patterns, counting the seconds between passes, and when the moment comes, he moves. He crosses the open ground in a low crouch, every muscle screaming, every nerve alive with terror. If a guard turns, if a dog barks, if a floodlight snaps on, he will be shot before he can explain. He reaches the Focke-Wulf and presses himself against the fuselage, breathing hard, listening. Nothing. He climbs onto the wing root, finds the handholds, and pulls himself up to the cockpit. The canopy is unlocked. He slides it open and the smell hits him. Oil, fuel, leather, the smell of a German fighter. He climbs inside and pulls the canopy closed. Darkness, total darkness. He cannot see the instruments. He cannot see the controls. He cannot risk a flashlight. He sits in the pilot's seat in the dark in an enemy aircraft and begins to learn the cockpit by touch. His hands move across the panel, switches, dials, levers. He finds the throttle. He finds the mixture control. He finds the magneto switches. He finds the starter button. Every control is labeled in German, words he cannot read even if there were light. He memorizes the positions. Throttle here, mixture here, magnetos here, starter here. He repeats it over and over, building a mental map until he is certain. He waits. Hours pass. He sits in the cockpit, freezing, exhausted, barely conscious, and waits for dawn. If he is discovered now, it is over. If a mechanic comes to warm up the engine, it is over. If a guard checks the aircraft, it is over. But no one comes. The sky begins to lighten. Gray dawn creeping over the horizon. He can see the instruments now. Altimeter, airspeed indicator, fuel gauge, oil pressure gauge, coolant temperature gauge, all labeled in German. None of it matters. He knows what they measure. He has flown enough aircraft to read them by shape and position. He takes a breath. This is it. He sets the mixture to rich. He cracks the throttle. He flips the magneto switches to both. He presses the starter button. The BMW radial engine coughs, sputters. The propeller blades jerk, and then the engine catches with a roar that shatters the silence of the airfield. 14 cylinders firing in sequence, 1,800 horsepower shaking the airframe. The noise is deafening. The vibration is violent. And across the airfield, men begin to shout. Carr does not hesitate. He releases the brakes. The Focke-Wulf lurches forward, rolling across the grass, gaining speed. He pushes the throttle forward, and the engine responds with a brutal surge of power. The tail lifts. The controls come alive in his hands. He pulls back on the stick. The aircraft lifts off. He is airborne in a stolen German fighter, and behind him the base erupts in chaos. Men running, sirens wailing, gunfire. Bullets snap past the canopy, punching holes in the fuselage, but he is already climbing, already turning west, already gone. The Focke-Wulf handles like nothing he has ever flown. It is heavier than the Mustang, more brutal, the controls requiring physical force to move. The radial engine torques hard to the left, and he compensates with rudder, fighting the aircraft, wrestling it into a shallow dive to build speed. He stays low. 50 feet above the treetops, the ground blurring beneath him at 300 miles per hour. If he climbs, German radar will see him. If he climbs, German fighters will intercept him. He stays low, skimming the earth, gambling everything on speed and surprise. The instrument panel makes no sense. The gauges are reversed. The switches are in the wrong places. He flies by instinct, by feel, trusting his hands more than his eyes. The engine is running hot. Oil pressure is fluctuating. Something is wrong, but he cannot stop. He cannot land. He has to reach Allied lines. The landscape changes. Forests give way to fields. Fields give way to towns. He sees roads packed with military vehicles. He sees rail yards. He sees anti-aircraft batteries tracking him, barrels swinging to follow his path, but he is too low, too fast. They do not fire. And then he crosses the front. He does not see a line. There is no border, but he feels it. The tension in his chest eases fractionally, and he begins to climb, gaining altitude, preparing to identify himself. That is when the American anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracer rounds arc up from the ground, bright streaks of red and orange, converging on his position. The sky around him fills with flak bursts. They see the black crosses on his wings. They see the German camouflage. They see an enemy aircraft, and they are trying to kill him. Carr banks hard, throwing the Focke-Wulf into a violent turn and dives again, trying to get below their firing angle. He is screaming into the radio, but the radio is German. The frequencies are wrong. No one can hear him. He has survived the theft. He has survived the flight, and now he is going to be shot down by his own side. He sees the airfield, his airfield, the base he flew out of 6 days ago. He lines up for landing, gear down, flaps down, and the anti-aircraft fire intensifies. They are not going to let him land. They are going to shoot him out of the sky. And then the landing gear fails. The right main gear collapses, the strut shearing off, and the Focke-Wulf drops onto its belly. Metal screams against concrete. Sparks fly. The propeller blades shatter. The aircraft skids across the runway, shedding pieces, slowing, until it finally grinds to a halt in a cloud of smoke and dust. Carr shoves the canopy open and jumps out, hands raised, shouting his name, his rank, his serial number. Military police surround him, rifles aimed at his chest. They are yelling at him in English, demanding he get on the ground, calling him a German pilot, a spy, a saboteur. He is on his knees, hands behind his head, when his commanding officer pushes through the crowd. The recognition is instant. His co stares at him, mouth open, unable to process what he is seeing. Carr, First Lieutenant Bruce Carr, missing in action, presumed dead, standing here in a German flight suit next to a shot-up Focke-Wulf 190. The guns lower. They take him to debriefing. Intelligence officers grill him for hours, demanding details, corroboration, evidence. They examine the aircraft. They analyze the bullet holes. They verify his story against radio logs and patrol reports. And slowly, the impossible becomes real. Bruce Carr stole a German fighter and flew it home. The story spreads. Within days, it is legend. Pilots buy him drinks. Mechanics ask to see the aircraft. Reporters request interviews, but Carr does not celebrate. He does not brag. He asks to return to combat. And they let him. He flies again. Mission after mission. Hunting German fighters over Bavaria, over Austria, over the crumbling remains of the Third Reich. And then, on one mission in late January 1945, he encounters a formation of German aircraft. 5 of them, Focke-Wulf 190s. He engages. The dogfight is brutal, aircraft twisting through the sky, engines screaming, guns hammering. Carr shoots down the first one, then the second, then the third. His wingman is calling for him to disengage to conserve ammunition, but Carr presses the attack. He shoots down the fourth, then the fifth. 5 kills in one mission. Ace in a day. When the war ends, Carr does not go home. He stays in the military. He flies in Korea, shooting down enemy aircraft over the Yalu River. He flies in Vietnam, leading missions over Hanoi. He rises through the ranks. Captain, Major, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel. He retires after 30 years of service, decorated with the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal with clusters. He never speaks much about the stolen aircraft. When asked, he gives short answers, deflecting attention, uncomfortable with the mythology that has grown around that November morning. Some historians question the details. Records are incomplete. Witnesses are few. The line between fact and legend blurs in the chaos of war. But the men who flew with him never doubt. They saw the Focke-Wulf. They saw the bullet holes. They saw Bruce Carr walk out of that cockpit alive. He dies in 1998 at the age of 73. His funeral is held at Arlington National Cemetery, the white headstones stretching in perfect rows across the hills of Virginia. A bugler plays taps. An honor guard folds the flag, and they lower him into the earth among the heroes. What do we make of a story like this? What do we say about a man who, when faced with certain death, chose instead to attempt the impossible? The easy answer is courage. The comfortable answer is heroism. But those words feel too small, too clean, too far removed from the reality of sitting in a freezing cockpit in the dark, memorizing controls by touch, knowing that the next sunrise might be your last. Bruce Carr did not steal that aircraft because he was brave. He stole it because he refused to accept that his story was over. He refused to believe that the war had won, that the odds had won, that fear and exhaustion and starvation had won. He looked at an enemy fighter and saw not an instrument of his death, but a tool for his survival. And he took it. That is not courage, that is will, pure, unbreakable, relentless will. And perhaps that is the real lesson. Not that one man can do the impossible, but that the impossible is simply what we call the things we have not yet refused to accept. Bruce Carr refused. He refused to die in that forest. He refused to surrender. He refused to give up. And because of that refusal, he lived. He lived to see his children grow. He lived to see the world change. He lived to see the enemies of 1944 become the allies of 1998. He lived a full life, a complete life, a life that almost ended in a Czechoslovakian forest, but instead continued for 54 more years. That is the victory, not the theft, not the flight, not the medals or the rank or the legend. The victory is that he lived. And now, decades later, we remember. We tell his story. We pass it on, because stories like this matter. They remind us that survival is not guaranteed, that freedom is not free, that the men and women who fought in that war did not do so because they were invincible, but because they were terrified and did it anyway. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. We want to hear from you. What part of Bruce Carr's story affected you the most? Was it the moment he sat in the cockpit in the dark? Was it the takeoff under fire? Was it the return to combat after everything he had endured? Leave a comment below and tell us. And also tell us where you are watching from. What city, state, or country? We love hearing from viewers all over the world. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for keeping stories like this alive.